Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're watching this video. Today, we are going to be delving into the Dawn era of the Elder Scrolls. This will be the first of many Tamrielic history videos that I plan to make while I impatiently await the release of the Elder Scrolls 6. I would like to first shout out the Elder Scrolls fandom wiki. This is where I got most of my information. There's going to be a link in the description if you want to go and read all about the history of the Elder Scrolls universe for yourself. But if you're not a nerd like me who likes to read fantasy historical timelines in my free time, and you would rather listen to someone else explain it in the background while you're doing chores or maybe going to bed, then this video is for you. Without further ado, let's get into the Dawn era and the creation of the world that we know as Nirn. The Dawn era is also referred to as the Elder Wilds by imperial historians. This is a time period that is so far ancient that the only things that we really know about this era are mostly through word-of-mouth myths and folktales. Much like in the real world, the further you go back, the less information that is retained. Even what is remembered is disputed by many. But most Tamrielic scholars can agree to one general series of events that began everything. So that is what we're going to cover today. In the beginning, there was nothing. Much like the beginning of every fantasy world, or even our own, depending on what you believe. Eventually, the twin forces of order and chaos came to be. The order of force was known as Anu, and the order of chaos, the force of order was known as Anu, and the force of chaos was known as Padomay. Since these are known as forces, you can't really think of them as beings like you or I. They're much more akin to the concept of time, where it exists, but you cannot reach out and grab it. The one difference is that Anu and Padomay seem to possess a will, which time does not exhibit. They decided to birth their own souls, which were then named Anuiel and Sithis. Anuiel is a patron deity of the Aldmeri pantheon and is known as the soul of all living things. I kind of think of them similar to a mother nature figure, the representation of all living things and general goodness. Sithis is, as you would imagine, the opposite. Sithis represents emptiness and the void. He is worshipped by the Dark Brotherhood, among other cults across Tamriel, and he's similar to the idea of the Grim Reaper. He's not necessarily evil, but he is the embodiment of darkness and emptiness. Where Anuiel brings light and life, Sithis brings dark and death. You cannot have one without the other, and thus they are in a constant combat and in balance. Now, if that wasn't trippy enough, the existence of these two beings overlapping each other creates what's known as the Orbis, or Grey Maybe. This is essentially the name of the universe that the Elder Scrolls is based in, and in this universe exists different galaxies. The first being Mundus, where Nirn is. Nirn is the name of the planet that we play the Elder Scrolls games on. Also inside of Mundus are Massor and Secunda, the moons that orbit Nirn, and the different Aedric planets, which we will get into the Aedra shortly. The second galaxy in this universe is Oblivion, or the Plains of Oblivion, where all of the different Daedric worlds exist. The third galaxy is known as Aetherius, or the Immortal Plane. This is the galaxy that the Aedra originate from, and is said to be the source of all magic. Many believe that souls go there upon death, as long as they are not already claimed by a Daedric prince. This gives Aetherius and Oblivion many similarities to Heaven and Hell. The fourth and final galaxy, and remember I'm putting galaxy in parentheses here because they aren't technically referred to as galaxies, but that is the simplest way to categorize them for my brain. Anyways, the fourth galaxy is the Void. This is a space filled with endless darkness and utter nothingness. The Dark Brotherhood believes that when they kill, they are sending those murdered souls to the Void. At this point in my research, I am unsure what differentiates whether a soul goes to the Void or Aetherius. Is it only those that are killed in Sithis' name, or something else? Hopefully, we will learn that as we go through this journey. After the creation of the known universe, Orbis, other beings began to form from the Void. The first of these beings were Uriel, the child of Anuiel, and Lorkhan, the child of Sithis. These two beings retain much of the values of their parents. Uriel is the most worshipped god to the Altmer, also known as Akatosh to the humans, and is the chief god of the Nine Divines, whereas Lorkhan despised by the elves, is seen as a patron hero to humans. He's also known as Shor or Shazar, and is credited with being the one who created Mundus and the races of Nirn. When Auriel was born, they created the concept of time, and with that creation, the universe began to stabilize, and other beings began to form their own identities. These beings are vastly more in number than the simple Aedra and Daedra that we know of today. There were supposedly hundreds of divine beings formed during this time. Now, throughout this process, Anu and Padomay were constantly struggling against each other, and through this struggle, numerous planes were created. After some time, Lorkhan began to approach the other divine beings with a plan to create Mundus, the mortal plane that all of the Elder Scrolls games take place on. He was successful in convincing a number of the divine beings to help him, including Auriel. All of these beings eventually became known as the Aedra, translating to our ancestors in the Elven tongue, and those that didn't help were known as the Daedra, translating to not our ancestors. Now, during this process, the Aedra believed that they would be able to create the planet just like Lorkhan said, and then poof, they got their own plane to rule over. But what Lorkhan knew, and didn't tell them, was that in creating this plane, they were essentially giving up parts of themselves and their power to do so. Anu and Padomay are infinite, so they can create all the planes that they want, but the other divine beings were not. Once the gods made this discovery, many of them decided to leave Mundus before its creation to retain what parts of themselves that they could. The most well-known of these gods that fled is Magnus, known as the god of magic. When he left, he created a hole in the barrier between planes, allowing Mundus to absorb magic. This hole is known as the sun and is named Magnus after the one who created it. Similarly, the stars are also smaller holes created by other gods when they also left Mundus before its creation was complete. The gods who fled before creation was finished are known as the Magna Ge. Those of the gods that decided to remain became known as the Eight Divines, or the Aedra. They each returned to their own planes once the creation was finished. It is believed that their planes can be visible as planets in the night sky. There was also a group of gods who completely surrendered their divinity and opted to become mortals. These early mortals were known as the El-Nefeh, and eventually became the races of the mythic or Merethic era that we will learn more about together in my next video. Those that remained, the Eight Divines, shortly before leaving to their own planes, created the Adamantine Tower. In this tower, they all conducted a meeting to decide Lorkhan's fate, since he was the one who tricked them into this costly plan. Eventually, they decided to go to war with Lorkhan. The war was between Auriel, the old El-Nefeh, and other heroes such as Trinamac, Finaster, and Ciribane. The followers of Lorkhan included Kine, Sun, Stoon, Junal, and members of the Wandering El-Nefeh. In the very end of the Dawn era, the war ends when Trinamac rips out Lorkhan's heart and Auriel shoots it into the sea, permanently binding Lorkhan to his creation. The battle was supposedly so great that it led to the splitting of the land into the different continents, much like many scientists believe that our Earth started as one landmass Pangea. Lorkhan's heart eventually leads to the creation of Vardenfell and the Red Mountain volcano. Then, some of the gods left Nirn, while the rest became El-Nefeh and remained to become the ancestors of the mortal races of Tamriel that we know today. Some became the Sesi, totally butchered that, but the Snake people of Akavir. Some became the Atmorans, ancestors to the Nords, the Yokudans, ancestors to the Redguards, the Needs, ancestors to the Imperials, and the Aldmer, ancestors to all the other elven races of Tamriel. With that, the Dawn era came to a close, and the Merethic era begins. This marks the beginning of recorded elven history. Now, hopefully you guys enjoyed that short history lesson of the Dawn era. If you want to see the next part where we delve into the Merethic era, or the era of the elves as the ancient Nords called it, then be sure to subscribe. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.